Imagine this: you're walking home from work, minding your own business, and within minutes, you're surrounded by police. Accused of a violent crime you didn't commit. Why? Because of your skin color. Now picture the man who accused you, a respected, wealthy businessman with political ties and a spotless public image. And he's lying. All of it, a setup. But here's the twist: this time, the truth fights back. This is the story of how one innocent black man refused to be erased and how a white FBI agent risked everything to help expose the truth. Betrayal. Power. Race. Redemption. Stick with this story till the very end, because what happens in the final moments will change the way you see justice forever.
It was a warm Saturday afternoon in Atlanta, Georgia, and the sun beamed down mercilessly on the sidewalks of Oak Street. The neighborhood was busy but familiar, a mix of coffee shops, music stores, and quiet locals going about their weekend routines. Street performers played saxophones on the corners, children ran with ice cream in hand, and traffic hummed in the distance. Among the crowd walked Darius Cole, a 32-year-old African-American man with kind eyes, a calm demeanor, and a freshly ironed flannel shirt over a plain white tee. Darius was on his way to meet his younger sister Mia for lunch after visiting a used bookstore 2 blocks away. He had his earbuds in, listening to some old-school Marvin Gaye, completely unaware that his day and life was about to take a sharp turn. A few steps ahead, in front of the small cafe called the Southern Cop, stood Richard Halston, a 45-year-old white businessman in an expensive gray blazer and tailored slacks. His watch alone cost more than most people's monthly rent. He was the kind of man who walked like he owned the sidewalk, always looking over his shoulder to make sure people respected his space. Inside the cafe, he had just finished a private meeting with a potential investor. But when Richard reached into his pocket for his wallet to pay the valet across the street, his hand hit nothing but fabric. Panic flashed across his face. He patted himself down, checked the briefcase, looked around, no wallet. And that's when he saw Darius, a black man walking calmly past, earbuds in, not even glancing toward him. Richard's thoughts turned cold. Something inside him made a leap, not logic, but prejudice. He didn't see a stranger. He saw a suspect. "Hey," he shouted across the street, striding forward aggressively. "Hey, you. Stop right there." Darius paused, turned around, confused. He pulled one earbud out. "Me. You walked right past me a second ago. Where's my wallet?" Darius blinked, stunned. I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't see anything." "Don't lie to me," Richard snapped. "You're the only one who walked by while I was in that cafe. You took it. I want it back, now." People on the street started slowing down. A few pulled out phones. A black man being accused loudly by a white man in broad daylight in the South wasn't something anyone took lightly anymore. Darius raised his hands instinctively, not in surrender, but in peace. "Sir, I didn't take your wallet. I don't even know you. You think you can just steal from me and walk away? I'm calling the police." And he did. Within minutes, 2 squad cars pulled up with lights flashing. The scene now had a small crowd around it. Darius was asked to place his hands on the hood of a patrol car while an officer, a younger white man with a clipped tone, patted him down. No wallet. Still, Darius was told to wait in the back seat while they sorted out. Richard gave a dramatic statement, filled with assumptions and no evidence. He claimed he saw Darius hovering suspiciously near his table. He used phrases like, "looked like he was casing the area," and "he bolted as soon as I noticed my wallet was gone." Despite a total lack of evidence, the officers were ready to take Darius in for questioning. He wasn't under arrest yet, but he wasn't free to go either. Across the city, in a downtown field office of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Agent Natalie Brooks was sipping bad coffee and reviewing data from an ongoing case involving financial fraud. Natalie, a 29-year-old white woman with a sharp jawline and sharper instincts, had grown up in Birmingham, Alabama. Her father had been a cop who believed in law and order, but Natalie had always leaned deeper into truth, into justice, and into fighting systemic abuse. She was well aware of how the legal system could be used and misused by those with power. A phone notification flashed across her desk. A friend from the local precinct sent her a quick message. Another stupid street accusation. Guys claiming a black dude stole his wallet outside the Southern Cup. Crowd's growing. Feels off. Natalie stood up immediately. By the time she arrived on Oak Street, the scene had calmed slightly, but Darius was still sitting silently in the back of the squad car, sweat on his brow, hands clenched together. Natalie flashed her badge to the officers, asked to review the scene, and most importantly, requested surveillance from the cafe. "You know we can't just hand that over without a warrant," said one of the officers. "You don't have to," Natalie said, smiling politely. "I already called it in. You'll have authorization in 5. Richard was still on the sidewalk, talking loudly to a small group of onlookers, still playing the victim. Inside the cafe, Natalie reviewed the footage alongside the manager. Frame by frame, she watched Richard stand up from his seat, knock over a glass of water, and unknowingly drop his wallet beneath the table as he bent down to pick up his briefcase. Darius wasn't even in the frame. In fact, Darius had passed the cafe only after Richard had already left it. Natalie exhaled slowly. Back outside, she walked straight to the officers. "Release him," she said firmly. "There's no evidence. He didn't take the wallet." But the younger cop started. "No, but I've seen the footage. The wallet was never taken. Halston dropped it himself." They opened the door, and Darius stepped out slowly, cautiously, like he still wasn't sure it was safe. Natalie approached him. "Mr. Cole, I'm Agent Brooks. You're free to go." "I'm so sorry this happened." He nodded, not quite able to form the words yet. His sister had just arrived, her eyes wide with terror and relief. But Natalie wasn't done. She turned to Richard. "You made a formal accusation. That accusation triggered a detainment and nearly an arrest. If this was a mistake, you need to say so. Now." Richard's jaw worked furiously. "I thought he did it. That's all. People make mistakes." Natalie's tone was calm, but cold. "You didn't just think. You swore. You gave a false statement. That's a crime." As Richard began to retreat, Natalie added, "And given the racial implications of your accusation, I'm going to escalate this. The Bureau doesn't tolerate race-based profiling, especially when it leads to wrongful detainment." She wasn't bluffing. Richard Halston had just stepped into the middle of a federal investigation. That night, as the city lights twinkled outside her window, Natalie sat at her desk and began typing a detailed report. She wasn't just going to let this go. Because if people like Halston weren't held accountable, this would never stop. And Darius? He was home with his sister, shaken but free this time. But deep inside, a fire had been lit. He had seen how quickly things could fall apart, and how one good person in the right place could turn the tide. This was far from over. The Monday after the Oak Street incident, Agent Natalie Brooks arrived at the FBI Atlanta field office before sunrise. Her inbox was already full. Most were standard updates, but one email stood out, flagged as high priority. Subject: Richard Halston, prior complaint, 2021. She opened it and began to read. 2 years ago, in Savannah, Richard Halston had accused a young black delivery driver of trespassing on private property. It was during a neighborhood barbecue at Halston's gated community. The driver, Andre Bowers, had been trying to deliver a package to the wrong house, GPS misfire. Halston insisted the man had been scouting homes, claiming he saw him looking through windows. The accusation nearly cost Andre his job. His employer had put him on unpaid leave during the investigation. Fortunately, a neighbor's doorbell camera had recorded the whole incident. No windows were peeped through. No suspicious behavior. The footage proved that Halston's story was, once again, a fabrication built on assumption and prejudice. Natalie leaned back in her chair, her jaw clenched. One false accusation might be a mistake. 2 was a pattern. And in law enforcement, patterns mattered. She opened a case file under the label. Halston, Richard, potential civil rights violation. She didn't expect it to be easy. Halston was connected. His older brother, Senator Clark Halston, held a seat in the Georgia state legislature. Their family name was carved into buildings across the state. Richard was protected, or thought he was. But Natalie knew something else about men like him. They never covered their tracks well enough. She picked up her phone and called Darius. Mr. Cole? It's Agent Brooks. Do you have a few minutes? Yeah, came his voice. You got more news? Plenty. They met that afternoon at a small park in Midtown Atlanta. Natalie wore plain clothes, and Darius showed up with a small notebook in hand. I've been thinking, Darius said, sitting down. This guy. Halston. He didn't just look at me and guess. He had something in his eyes. Like he wanted it to be me. Like he was waiting for someone to blame. Natalie nodded. He's done it before. 2 years ago in Savannah. The guy he accused, Andre Bowers. I've already spoken to him. He's willing to testify. Darius looked down, absorbing that. So what happens now? We build a case, she said. I need you to write down every detail of what happened that day. How you felt. Who you saw. I'll request the names of all the witnesses who submitted phone footage. The more angles, the better. Halston made a false report. That's a federal crime, and if we can tie it to a racial motive, it becomes a civil rights case. But will it stick? Darius asked. I mean, people like him, they get away with this all the time. Natalie gave a half smile. Not this time. Back at the office, Natalie assembled a small task force. One of the members, Agent Jorge Ramirez, specialized in digital forensics. Within a day, Jorge recovered audio from one bystander's phone that captured Richard muttering something under his breath when he first accused Darius. These people think they can get away with anything. It wasn't a full sentence, but it said enough. Coupled with his previous incident in Savannah, the case began to gain weight. Natalie's supervisor, Director Helen Barrett, authorized formal escalation to the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division. But Halston wasn't going down without a fight. 2 days later, Natalie was pulled into a private meeting with Director Barrett. Word came down from upstairs, Barrett said. Senator Halston's office just called. They want to know why the FBI is investigating a harmless misunderstanding. Natalie crossed her arms. It wasn't harmless. And it wasn't a misunderstanding. We have evidence. I'm not saying you're wrong, Barrett said calmly. I'm saying they're going to come after you. Be ready. Natalie returned to her desk, undeterred. If they wanted to play politics, fine. But she had something stronger, the truth and momentum. Meanwhile, Richard Halston sat in his corner office on the 17th floor of Halston Financial Group, pacing. His hands shook as he tried to dial his brother's number again. You said they'd drop it, he hissed into the phone. You said it would go away. Senator Clark, Halston responded coolly. Then why the hell did you lie again, Richard? I didn't lie. I made a mistake. You don't get to make mistakes anymore. You're not some nobody. Richard slammed the phone down and stared out the window. He had always been able to bend things his way. But now, he could feel something shifting. The story had legs. Local media were starting to ask questions. People were talking online. Footage of the event had spread to Twitter and TikTok. It had over 750,000 views. And in every comment section, the same question was asked. Why do men like him keep getting away with it? Natalie knew they needed one more piece to lock the case, motive. And it came from the unlikeliest place. While reviewing Halston's recent travel history, Agent Ramirez found that Richard had visited a country club in Alpharetta, a known hotspot for private conservative donors. The club required background checks on all new visitors. But one of their workers, a young biracial woman named Lena Walsh, had recently quit her job, citing racial hostility. Natalie reached out. Lena was nervous at first, but she agreed to talk. I overheard him, she said. Last month. He was talking to this group of guys near the patio. He said, if I see one more thug walking through my neighborhood, I swear I'll do something about it. They all laughed. It gave me chills. That was it. A witness. A quote. A timeline. Natalie added it to the case file. By Friday, she had enough for a formal indictment. She presented her findings to the assistant U.S. attorney and began preparing for a grand jury. Richard Halston would be charged with filing a false report, attempted obstruction of justice, and racially motivated civil rights violation under Title 18, Section 242 of the U.S. Code. But she also knew what came next, the backlash. And it came fast. The Halston family hired a PR firm. They spun a story. Richard Halston is a loyal citizen who simply made an error during a stressful moment. Cable news picked it up. Some defended Richard. Others attacked Natalie. But she didn't flinch. Because when she met Darius again that weekend, and he told her that people in his community were finally talking about justice, she knew the fight was worth it. And for the first time in a long time, Darius Cole allowed himself to hope. It was the morning of the arraignment. A gray drizzle fell over downtown Atlanta as dozens of reporters gathered outside the Fulton County Courthouse. Cameramen adjusted tripods. Legal analysts spoke into microphones. Headlines scrolled across the bottom of news channels. Richard Halston to face federal charges over false accusation. Inside, the courtroom was packed. Among the crowd sat Darius Cole, dressed in a navy blazer and dark jeans, his posture calm but alert. To his left was his sister Mia, gripping his hand tightly. On the other side of the room, Richard Halston sat beside his defense attorney, Gordon Vance, a slick-haired litigator known for spinning gold out of scandal. Agent Natalie Brooks took her place in the gallery behind the prosecution table. This wasn't her first courtroom experience, but this case carried more weight than most. The judge entered. The room stood. Silence swept across the room like a tide. The charges were read aloud. Making a false statement to law enforcement. Obstruction of justice. Violation of civil rights under color of law. Richard's plea was clear and expected. Not guilty, Your Honor. The courtroom murmured, but the judge called for order. The trial date was set for 6 weeks later, and bail was granted, much to the displeasure of many watching. Richard walked out with his chin up and eyes scanning the media, already practicing his future rebuttal interviews. But outside the courthouse, the narrative had shifted. That night, WNN Atlanta aired a feature titled Guilty Until Proven Rich, in which they interviewed Darius. I didn't want this. I didn't go looking for justice because I wanted revenge. I wanted the truth to be loud enough to shut the lies up, Darius said on camera. His calm, measured words resonated with viewers across the country. The segment went viral. Hashtags like hashtag Justice for Darius and hashtag Stop the Setup trended for days. Meanwhile, Richard's PR team scrambled. He gave a short interview on a conservative talk show, calling the case a tragic misunderstanding, politicized by people who want to destroy reputations. But he fumbled when the host asked if he had ever apologized to Darius. He paused, and then said, "I don't believe I need to." That clip was replayed on every major network the next morning. Back at the FBI office, Natalie was preparing her testimony. The prosecution team was building their case around 3 main pillars. Pattern of false racial accusations, with testimonies from both Darius and Andre Bowers. Witness statements and video evidence, clearly contradicting Halston's claims. Racially charged comments and intent, with Lena Walsh's statement as a key. But Natalie wanted to go further. She wanted to prove not just that Halston lied, but why he lied. That meant digging into Richard's psychological profile. And for that, she brought in Dr. Elaine Foster, a behavioral analyst and court-certified expert in racial bias. Over several interviews, Dr. Foster reviewed Halston's language, his behavior in both incidents, and his reaction under pressure. Her conclusion was clear. This wasn't panic. This was projection. He saw a black man near him, and in that moment, his internal prejudice made him feel entitled to accuse. He didn't need evidence, only assumption. 3 weeks before the trial, Natalie received a surprising call from someone who used to work for Halston's company. Trey Marshall, a former junior accountant at Halston Financial, said he had something to share. They met at a neutral location, a small diner in Marietta. He made jokes. Racial ones. Behind closed doors, Trey said. There were days he'd come into meetings and say stuff like, "Remind me to never hire from the city again." Or too much attitude in those neighborhoods. "Do you have anything recorded?" Natalie asked, hopeful. "I do." One voicemail. He left it by accident. Trey pulled out his phone and hit play. "Trey, you better not mess this up. I don't care what some intern thinks. You know how these people are. They screw up and blame us, every time. Anyway, I want those numbers fixed by noon." Natalie's heart raced. It wasn't a smoking gun, but it was proof of his mindset, and it would back up Dr. Foster's profile. With Trey's consent, she submitted the voicemail to the prosecution team. They added it to the witness list. As the trial approached, Halston's team moved to have several testimonies dismissed. They tried to claim Lena Walsh was unreliable, Trey Marshall disgruntled, and Andre Bowers irrelevant. but the judge ruled each of them admissible. Richard was losing ground, and he knew it. In a last-ditch effort, his brother Senator Halston released a statement urging the public to look beyond this media circus and support a good man caught in a bad situation. It backfired. Public response was brutal. One editorial in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution read, "This case isn't about politics. It's about a man who thought the color of someone's skin was enough to justify an accusation, and the system that almost let him get away with it." The night before the trial began, Darius stood on his balcony overlooking the city. The skyline sparkled, but he didn't feel calm. He felt heavy, like the whole world was about to watch his pain on display. Natalie called. "You okay?" she asked. "I will be," he said. "We're going to win this," she told him. "I don't need to win," Darius said. "I just need the truth to speak louder than the lie." Natalie smiled quietly. "Then you're already halfway there." The next morning, the courtroom filled again. Cameras lined the hallway. Protesters gathered outside with signs. "Stop weaponizing race. We believe Darius. Truth over power." And so began the trial of United States versus Richard Halston, a battle not just over one accusation, but over a system too long tilted in favor of those who abuse it. And the jury? They were watching closely. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation as the United States versus Richard Halston officially began. Judge Eleanor McKay, known for her no-nonsense approach and razor-sharp questioning, presided from the bench. 12 jurors, a diverse mix of ages and backgrounds, sat silently as the attorneys took their positions. On one side, Assistant U.S. Attorney Brian Chin stood tall and calm, backed by the quiet presence of Agent Natalie Brooks. On the other, Defense Attorney Gordon Vance projected smooth confidence, ready to twist facts into shadows. In the gallery, Darius Cole sat with his sister Mia and a few close friends. He wasn't here for revenge. He was here because if he didn't show up and speak, no one would. Opening statements. Attorney Chin stood first. He walked slowly across the courtroom, speaking plainly. "This case isn't about mistaken identity. It's about weaponized assumption. Mr. Halston didn't panic, he acted. He pointed to a man who had done nothing wrong and told the police a story built on nothing but skin color and fear." He paused, letting the silence land. "We will show you, through witnesses, recordings, and expert analysis, that Mr. Halston didn't just make a mistake, he lied with purpose." Then it was Gordon Vance's turn. He adjusted his cufflinks and began with practiced charm. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you're going to hear a lot about race. And that's understandable. This is America. But this case is about one thing: chaos. A broken window. A man under stress. A community already on edge." Mr. Halston reacted, poorly, perhaps, but not criminally. He ended with a subtle smirk. "Sometimes, perception becomes reality. But that doesn't make it truth." The first witness, Darius Cole. All eyes turned as Darius was called to the stand. He took a deep breath before stepping up. The oath felt heavier than he expected. When he sat down, Attorney Chin approached slowly. "Mr. Cole, can you tell the court what you were doing on the day of May 12th, around 8:15 p.m.? "Walking home. I had just gotten off work. I live 2 blocks from where it happened." "Did you see Mr. Halston before he accused you?" "No. I didn't even know who he was." Chin showed the jury a freeze frame from one of the videos, Richard pointing, the police handcuffing Darius. "And when this moment happened, did you say anything?" "I asked what I did wrong. They said someone said I broke a window. I hadn't even heard glass." Vance's cross-examination came next. He tried to discredit Darius subtly. "Mr. Cole, you were wearing a hoodie that night?" "Yeah. It was raining." "Dark gray hoodie, correct?" "Yes." "And you were walking alone?" "Yes." Vance turned to the jury. "So you're saying a man in a dark hoodie walking alone at night, that's all it took to get you accused?" Darius looked him square in the eye. "That's all it ever takes." The courtroom stilled. The second witness, Andre Bowers. Andre, a delivery driver from Savannah, took the stand next. He told his story from 2 years ago. The false accusation. The unpaid suspension. The humiliation. He ended with this. He said, "I was scouting homes. All I did was drop off a package. That's it. If that camera hadn't been there, I don't know what would have happened to me." The jury looked uncomfortable. The idea of it happening once was troubling. Twice? It began to look like a pattern. The third witness, Lena Walsh. Lena, the former country club server, testified about Halston's casual racism. He talked like that all the time. Those people this, thugs that. Sometimes he'd even joke about calling the cops if he saw someone walking by who didn't look right. Vance objected, hearsay, but Judge McKay allowed it, noting the relevance to motive and mindset. The expert, Dr. Elaine Foster. Dr. Foster, calm and precise, walked the jury through what she called learned racial threat response. Mr. Halston's pattern of behavior, quick accusations with no evidence against black men, reveals not a fear response, but a dominance reflex. He felt entitled to dictate who belonged. Vance tried to poke holes. Doctor, can we say with certainty what a man thinks? Not with certainty, she replied smoothly. But when the behavior is repeated, consistent, and selective, we can say what's likely. The voicemail. Finally, the courtroom was played the voicemail recorded by Trey Marshall, Halston's former employee. You know how these people are. The words hung in the air. The jury stiffened. Vance objected again. Taken out of context, he insisted. But the damage was done. Natalie could feel it. The tone in the room had shifted. The defense's strategy. Halston himself took the stand. He appeared nervous but tried to stay controlled. I didn't know who he was. I panicked. I thought I saw him near the broken window. It was instinct. Chin stood. Instinct? Or prejudice? I'm not a racist. And yet you falsely accused 2 black men in 2 years. Both of them innocent. Both times, no evidence. Halston stumbled. I was trying to protect my neighborhood. By blaming innocent men? Silence. The prosecution rested. That night, every media outlet covered the trial. Clips of Darius's testimony were everywhere. Hashtags lit up again. Hashtag guilty intent, hashtag Halston trial, and hashtag protect the innocent. But Natalie knew public opinion couldn't convict. Only the jury could. And the jury now had everything they needed. As the trial entered its final phase, one question remained. Would justice finally speak louder than privilege? The courtroom was silent. Not tense. Not anxious. Silent, like the air had been sucked from the room. The jury had been out for 6 hours. Every shuffle of a paper, every creak of a bench made someone look toward the door. Agent Natalie Brooks sat next to U.S. Attorney Brian Chin, her pen tapping against a legal pad. Darius Cole, calm but visibly exhausted, sat with his hands clenched on his knees. Then the door opened. All rise, the bailiff said. The jurors filed in. Some had their hands folded, others held nervous glances. One, an older woman in a maroon jacket, seemed to carry the weight of the whole nation on her shoulders. Judge Eleanor McKay looked to the foreperson. Has the jury reached a verdict? We have, Your Honor. Please read it. The courtroom held its breath. In the matter of United States versus Richard Halston, on the charge of making a false statement to federal law enforcement, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of obstruction of justice, guilty. On the charge of violation of civil rights under color of law, guilty. Gasps. Not loud, but enough to stir the oxygen back into the room. The defense team went rigid. Gordon Vance placed a slow, firm hand on Halston's shoulder. But Halston didn't look back at them. He stared at Darius. It wasn't hatred. It was disbelief. Like he couldn't believe he was the one found guilty. Outside the courthouse, news cameras swarmed. The front steps became a battleground of public opinion. Activists cheered. Civil rights leaders called it a landmark case for modern accountability. Some commentators on conservative networks cried political persecution, but the facts were too overwhelming to spin. Darius stepped outside briefly with Mia and Natalie beside him. He was bombarded with questions. Darius, how do you feel now that justice was served? Do you forgive Richard Halston? What do you say to others who've been falsely accused like you? He looked directly into the cameras. It was never about me. It was about how easy it is to believe the worst about people who look like me, and how rare it is for that lie to cost the person who tells it. Today, the lie lost. That's all. Fallout and consequences. Within a week of the verdict, Senator Halston withdrew from re-election citing family matters. Corporate sponsors pulled out from Halston Financial. Stock dropped 35% in one day. But the ripples reached further. In states across the country, lawmakers proposed new legislation modeled on the case, The Cole Act aimed at increasing penalties for racially motivated false reporting. Natalie watched it all unfold quietly. She had been reassigned to another district. She didn't mind, she'd done what she came to do. One night, packing her office into boxes, she found a note on her desk. "You didn't just protect a man. You made others feel seen. Thank you, D." She smiled. Richard in prison. 6 months later, Richard Halston sat in FMC Lexington, a federal medical center in Kentucky. He wasn't in general population. His lawyers had secured him protective custody. His cell was neat. The man who once hosted fundraisers for senators now ate microwaved food on a plastic tray. He had appealed the verdict twice. He'd lost both times. But even worse was the silence. No phone calls. No visitors. No articles in defense of him anymore. He was a headline, and then he was gone. One day, a guard handed him a letter. It had no return address. Just his name. He opened it. Inside was a copy of the front page of The Atlantic. "The cost of a lie, one man's fall, one nation's lesson." Below it, someone had written in pen, "The mirror never blinks." Richard tore it in half, but he couldn't stop thinking about it. Darius's life after. Darius returned to work slowly. He never wanted fame, but he accepted the platform that came with it. He joined a nonprofit focused on justice reform. Occasionally, he gave talks to students. He moved to a quieter neighborhood in Midtown. One evening, he stood on his balcony again, just like the night before the trial. The air was cool. His phone buzzed. A text from Natalie. "The Cole Act passed in Georgia. You did it." He typed back, "No, we did." He put the phone down and watched the city. Somewhere out there, someone else had just been stopped, questioned, watched too closely. But now, he hoped, things might go differently. Maybe not always. But now, maybe sometimes. The bigger picture. The verdict sparked a national conversation. Not just about race, but about accountability. About how easy it is to believe the one in the suit, the one with the nameplate, the one who speaks first. Social media lit up with stories. When I was 16, I was stopped in my own driveway. My neighbor once called the cops because I walked too slow. They asked me if I lived in the house I owned. The truth spread like wildfire, because the lie had finally burned. 6 months had passed since the trial. The world had moved on, headlines faded, new scandals took over, new names trended. But for Darius Cole, nothing felt quite the same. He was no longer anonymous, but neither was he famous in the way some people imagined. He wasn't rich. He wasn't giving TED Talks. What he had was truth and a voice, and he was learning to use it. A visit to the school. One warm morning in Atlanta, Darius was invited to speak at Westview High, his old school. He hadn't walked those halls in over a decade. The auditorium was filled with students, some bored, some curious, some wide-eyed. But when Darius stepped onto the stage and stood in silence for a few seconds before speaking, the room quieted. "I'm not here to tell you how to live," he began. "I'm here to remind you that your life has value, even when people try to say otherwise." He didn't mention Halston by name. He didn't need to. The most dangerous lie isn't the one others tell about you. It's the one you start to believe about yourself. After the talk, dozens of kids came up. One girl said, "My brother went through something like that. Cops roughed him up for no reason." A boy asked, "How do you stay calm when they don't even see you as human?" Darius didn't have a perfect answer. But he said this: "You stay calm because you know the truth. You hold it like armor." Natalie's new mission. Agent Natalie Brooks had transferred to Washington, D.C. She now worked in a specialized unit focused on civil rights enforcement. Her office was modest, no plaques or awards on the wall, just case files, court calendars, and a small framed photo of her late father, who had served in the Air Force. One evening, she found herself in a conference room briefing a team of young agents. Their next case, a racial profiling incident in Baltimore. Different city, same pattern. She took a deep breath before speaking. What we do here isn't about being heroes. It's about giving truth a voice where lies have too much power. If you're not ready to get uncomfortable, you're in the wrong room. They listened. Because she wasn't just their supervisor. She was the agent who stood beside Darius Cole when he had every reason to give up. Richard Halston, a name forgotten. Richard Halston served time in federal prison. His cell block had become a place where former power meant nothing. His hair turned gray quickly. The tan, polished executive image faded under fluorescent lights and faded clothes. He tried to write a memoir, self-pitying, defensive, filled with justifications. No publisher wanted it. He applied for early release on good behavior. Denied. His son stopped speaking to him. His wife filed for divorce. The world had moved on without him. He had told one lie too many. The anniversary. Exactly 1 year after the night of the false accusation, Darius walked that same sidewalk again. This time, he wasn't alone. Mia was with him, holding 2 coffees. They walked past the place where the window had been shattered, now repaired and occupied by a new bookstore. A young black man stood inside behind the register, smiling at a customer. Funny how something broken can still become something new, Mia said. Darius nodded. They sat on a bench nearby, quiet, observing, not reflecting in sadness, but in clarity. Sometimes, Darius said, it takes one loud case to make people hear what's been whispered for decades. And sometimes, Mia replied, one voice changes the whole room. He looked down at his phone. A new email from the nonprofit he joined. They wanted him to help launch a new initiative, a national hotline for reporting racially motivated false accusations. He hit reply. I'm in. Final reflections. In a downtown gallery months later, a new photography exhibit opened. The Weight of Assumption. Photos of people, Black, Latino, Asian, Muslim, Indigenous, each captioned with a quote about a time they were wrongly accused, profiled, or questioned for simply existing. In the center of the gallery was a portrait of Darius. He stood beneath a streetlight, the shadows long, but his face lit with quiet defiance. Below it, his words. I was once the suspect in someone else's story. Now, I tell my own. Epilogue. A note to the viewer. What happened to Darius Cole isn't just fiction. It's a reflection. A mirror. This story isn't meant to make you comfortable. It's meant to make you think. How many Darius Coles go unnamed each day? How many false accusations don't make the news? How many people don't have an Agent Brooks to believe them? Justice doesn't end with a verdict. It begins with attention. It continues with action. And it lives only when we choose to see.